You are tuned to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. I believe that John McMillon is the next big closer in Kansas City. I've got a pulse of where I'm at with Brady Singer, and I've got some truth to tell you about Jordan Lyles. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can always find us on those podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and you can catch us on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If this is your first episode ever checking out of Locked On Royals, my background is being a lifelong Royals fan. I've turned that fandom into a career. I now work in sports radio right here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Have a nightly show, or at least once a week, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays on Sports Radio 810 WHB. And then a morning show Monday through Friday on 1510 AM ESPN Kansas City. Every single Monday night for home games at Kauffman Stadium, I go out there, get access to the clubhouse, talk with players. So I will be out there tomorrow night for their series opener, and the opener for the homestand against the Pittsburgh Pirates, of course, hoping, for a much better outcome than what we saw in Seattle this weekend, which was a buzzsaw series. I tweeted this out, and again, you can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. This felt like the most predictable series all season long. That is a Seattle team that had won 10 of 11. They were right on the heels of first place, and here come the Royals, who are inching closer and closer to 50 games under 500. And now, of course, after a 3-game sweep, they have accomplished that. They are 41-91. And I think everything in this series went about how I expected. I thought maybe the Royals offense could put together better days than they really did. The only game they were competitive in was Friday night, and Brady Singer let them down. And we're going to talk about Brady Singer in the second segment. But Jordan Lyles goes out there on Saturday, gets shelled. Who's really shocked at this point? And then today, I was very impressed by what I saw from Alec Marsh. Alec Marsh is putting together those starts where they don't blow your socks off, but the strikeout numbers are something to watch. I mean, his starts in Oakland and Seattle are identical. 5 2/3, 9 Ks, 2 walks. I think he allowed one more hit against Oakland than he did against Seattle. Could be wrong on that, but pretty much identical numbers. And I'm watching Alec Marsh start, and I'm trying to spin it as well. Is there anything, and I mean anything, you can take away from this series, roll into a long homestand where you get Pittsburgh, Boston, and Chicago, and go, well, let's just see where it goes from here. The good thing is I think Alec Marsh gets starts for the rest of the year. Just see what you have and add him to the list kind of with Cole Reagans, where I'm intrigued a little bit what I can see from Alec Marsh. Now, nowhere near the same level that I am with Cole Reagans, who will start on Tuesday for Kansas City. But Alec Marsh is one of those guys where I kind of want to watch that game. I will stop what I'm doing, at least watch 4 to 5 innings, see how he handles those 4 to 5 innings. If I can't watch it, I at least try to update myself. Like yesterday, I'll be completely candid with everybody. After Jordan Lyles gave up a home run, I said, well, the wheels are going to fall off. I can do something better with my Saturday. I'm not going to sit around and watch Jordan Lyles throw a baseball for the next hour and a half. I'm not going to do it to myself, as you shouldn't. And we'll discuss Jordan Lyles in the third segment today. But I did have one positive to take away from this series, and it's John McMillon. John McMillon, to me, is as much of a lock as you could possibly be for a guy who's thrown 4 innings. I mean, John McMillon could go into next season, could go into the regular season, and win the closer's job for Kansas City because of the pure stuff. And don't think it's that out of the question, because the Royals tried to do that with Josh Staumont as well. Josh Staumont had a great COVID season, and I'd imagine that by the end of everything, by the end of September, John McMillon has about 10 to 12 innings. I bet he's got 7 or 8 more outings, hoping that the Royals are in competitive games, because I think they're going to throw him in competitive games and not in blowouts. But that's closer stuff, dude. I interviewed David Lesky last week, not on this show, on ESPN Wichita, which I also produce for. But David Lesky, DB Lesky on Twitter, one of the greatest Royals follows out there. And he believes kind of the same thing, that John McMillon has that closer stuff. All he needs now is a dirty beard like Greg Holland had, or a dirty mustache. So you just have that feel. A nasty bullpen closer. I mean, he's out there pounding his chest, a triple-digit fastball, wipeout slider. And, oh, get this, he hasn't walked anybody. There's one thing I can walk away from this series. Hell, I don't care if it's 3 outs from John McMillon. It was a pretty abysmal series. Now, Bobby Witt Jr. didn't play that great. Michael Garcia wasn't that great. Hey, Nelly Velasquez, Nelly Nukes homered in this game, and always fun to see him run into one. I do have some thoughts about him and where he can fit into this lineup, but good to see him turn things around, because it was I would say, pretty poor last 10 to 15 plate appearance stretch for him in Kansas City. But John McMillon, his last 3 outings have been the exact same. 2 punch outs, no hits, no walks. I mean, when he comes in there, he means business. And it really does remind me, and maybe this is a bad comparison, but it does remind me when Josh Staumont was thriving in the COVID year. When Josh Staumont came in and he was on, he wasn't going to give up anything. He was going to collect a pair of strikeouts. I mean, you're sitting 98 to 102. He had the powerful 12-6 curve. John McMillon uses that slider. I mean, his 2 pitches right now are above 100 and stuff plus. That's closer stuff. And this is a good thing, too. And it's why I wanted to talk about this today on the podcast, is that if John McMillon finishes out this year with 7 or 8 really strong outings, that's only going to tell the Royals, and it's going to persuade the Royals, well, now you could trade Carlos Hernandez because you have a replacement. You also could go on the flip side here and say, we finally have 2 guys in our bullpen that have great stuff and they can get outs. That's Hernandez. That's McMillon. If you wanted to roll into 2024 and say Carlos is the 8th, McMillon is the 9th, I'm not going to complain too much. But if you can get some of a decent return for Carlos Hernandez, you pull the trigger, because you always want to pull the trigger when it comes to your relievers. You want to trade them for value in any way that you can. But if the Royals are looking at rebuilding their bullpen, a bad place to start is not going with John McMillon and Carlos Hernandez. Those are 2 great options to roll with. Power stuff, power swing and miss stuff. And it's also a great thing for the Royals system that you have John McMillon, who was an undrafted free agent, and right now he's your best bullpen arm. Yes, it says a lot about the Royals bullpen, but it also shows you can find guys with that stuff without going through free agency, without signing a big-time deal, without going out there and signing another Taylor Clark or Ryan Yarbrough. And Ryan Yarbrough was fine in a starter's role, not so much in a bullpen role. The Royals can rebuild their bullpen with guys like John McMillon. And there's a Will Klein down in AAA Omaha. There's a Steven Cruz, and I get it. The numbers aren't great. But here's one thing about John McMillon that I've been wildly impressed with. We always knew the strikeout numbers would be there, but he hasn't walked anybody and not really come close to walking anybody. That's not been a bad part of his game. He's made 1 bad pitch, and it was in his major league debut, and he gave up a home run. Since then, nobody's made solid contact against him. And most guys are struggling even to put the ball in play against him. And that's an undrafted free agent. The walk numbers were a concern in AA and AAA and high across the board. They were always a problem. That's a problem for Will Klein. It's a problem for Steven Cruz. But you know what they both have? Power fastballs, power swing and miss stuff. That's something I want to see. That's something I'm willing to work with than a guy who's a soft tosser. That Austin Cox was fine today, but I pause on Austin Cox being a future fit in the bullpen because the stuff just isn't good enough. John McMillon stuff would play in any bullpen in Major League Baseball right now. It's that good. I mean, that slider, if you can set it up with the fastball, nobody's touching that. There's not a single player in baseball, maybe Shohei Ohtani, who could hit that pitch, and that would still be tough for him to hit. I mean, yeah, there's going to be times where he hangs it or it's not the best pitch, but when that thing is on, you saw it today against one of the best hitters in baseball right now, and Julio Rodriguez, he was no match. An undrafted free agent. That's how you build a bullpen. You got to build it with guys like that. It was unfortunate to see Jake Brents be returned from his rehab assignment because Jake Brents is a guy that kind of had that power stuff before the Tommy John. But who knows now? You shut him down for the year. If he could be a factor in spring training, I'd like to see. But Jake Brents coming off Tommy John, if he's throwing 98, 99 with that power slider and the changeup he had, he's worth a shot in the bullpen. Always, always, always take stuff over command first. You can work with it. You can work with command. You can't teach a guy to have better stuff. I know Tampa Bay seemingly can do that, and I know a lot of times that teams can add that velocity. I get it. It's possible. But if you have a guy that's raw and throws 99, 100, work with that over a guy that maybe has better command but sits 90 to 92 because that just won't play in the bullpen. One positive, really. And maybe I'll go 1.5 because Alec Marsh was pretty good today. 9 Ks against a really good Seattle lineup in front of a sold-out crowd. So I'll go 1.5. Good things from this series. John McMillon, number 1, and Alec Marsh, number 2. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I've got a pretty strong feeling as to where I'm at with Brady Singer. We've discussed him in multiple podcasts before, and we're going to do it again right here on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Bird Dogs, this special Sunday episode, because I didn't give you that episode on Tuesday. I was feeling a little bit under the weather, but always want to give you guys 5 episodes every single week, no matter how good or bad this team is doing. But with Bird Dogs, it's the perfect time to get Bird Dogs because it has been hot as hell in Kansas City, triple digits, and you want attire, you want clothing where when you sweat, it's not going to bother you that much. I've got multiple pairs of Bird Dogs. I'm wearing their hat right now. It's a very comfortable hat. Again, when you go out there, it's not itchy. With the humidity in Kansas City, it's not going to bother you. And they really are the most comfortable pair of shorts that I've ever owned. It's also great sweatpants as well. And if you want to get this hat is pretty easy to get. And I'm going to tell you why. Because with Bird Dogs, all you got to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or enter promo code LockedOnMLB for a free white tech hat, the exact one I'm wearing right now with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or promo code LockedOnMLB for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Man, I just got to say, with the heat and the humidity, you cannot go wrong with a pair of Bird Dogs. I can tell you, though, what the Royals have been going wrong with, and it has been maybe falling for what Brady Singer had done since the All-Star break. And I have been somebody that has wanted to, time and time again, over and over and over, believe in Brady Singer. Believe that the first half was just an illusion. It wasn't real. Well, we can wash it away and let's just forget about it. Because Brady Singer can be an anchor to this rotation. And I think it's a good time to bring up the Brady Singer situation because we just talked about John McMillon and Carlos Hernandez. Like, John McMillon, to me, is the Cole Reagans of the bullpen. We've all just fallen in love with him so quickly because of the power stuff, the swing and miss stuff, and every time he goes out there, you feel good. Carlos Hernandez was that guy that early on we all fell in love with because of what he was doing. Then he hit that bad stretch, and it was, okay, let's move on from Carlos Hernandez. I think it's the exact same thing with Brady Singer. That Brady Singer, when he pitches well, he's going to be a part of this rotation. The minute he starts torpedoing again, we get back on the train of, he's not going to be a long-term fit. You got to trade him while you can. Here's the pulse, and here's where I'm at with Brady Singer. One, I don't think he's ever going to be a number 1 in Kansas City. That's kind of where I'm at right now. He's never going to be that one in Kansas City, and that should be a pretty big selling point for the Royals this offseason. If Brady Singer was going to be a lock for a 1 next year, like he's just coming in, he's got number 1 stuff, then okay, hang on to him because you do have to build a rotation at some point. If you don't believe Brady Singer can ever get to that level, I don't think that he's worth hanging on to. And here's another thing. I would probably put it above 50% that when Brady Singer goes elsewhere, he's going to succeed. But that can never strike fear in your eyes. That can never make you pause when trying to make a deal. You can't deal guys based off fear of them succeeding. The Ryan O'Hearn situation, I think more than anything, is a guy finding a fresh start and playing on a more competitive team. You trade Brady Singer to the Reds, and the Reds were interested in Brady Singer. Good for Brady Singer, good for the Reds. If he succeeds, that's good on them. But it's not so cut and dry that, oh, every time they go somewhere, they succeed. Sometimes it's just a fresh start. Okay, I feel like a lot of us don't always buy into that because it just feels like a throw-in thing to say when a guy succeeds. Oh, he's just having more fun over there. Nicky Lopez playing great in Atlanta, probably because he's on a much more competitive team and there's less pressure on him. Brady Singer goes to Cincinnati. He's not the ace. I think in Kansas City, because he was a first-round pick, because of what we built him up as, he was supposed to be the number one. But I think starts on Friday are why I'm okay if they are to trade, and why I think from time to time you can't get too caught up when a guy like Brady Singer pitches really well. Now, last year, it was a little bit different to me because when he was on, I'll always remember that start in the Bronx against New York when he was lights out for 7 8 innings. I think it was 7 innings in total. Even just absolutely lights out. But he was sitting 94 to 96, 97. Singer's sitting about 90 to 92 this year. That's never going to be number one stuff. And it's especially not going to be number one stuff if you don't have that third pitch. He threw that changeup a little bit more, but that outing was bad against Seattle. I mean, J.P. Crawford homered off him before the Apple TV broadcast could get through the lineup. I mean, there's times in outings where I wish Brady Singer would get roughed up a little bit, give up 2 or 3 in the first or second, and then get you through 6. I will say this about Alec Marsh, as young as he is, and it's frustrating how many long balls he gives up. Solo home run today to Teoscar Hernandez, a 2-run shot by Julio Rodriguez, just pitches middle. I mean, that does have to be fixed if he's ever going to reach his ceiling. But Alec Marsh has shown, even in the bulk role, hey, you get me for 2 or 3 in the first 2 innings, it's still my job to keep this team in the game. That's the bulldog mentality. I've seen Brady Singer do it before, but games like Friday, where you're out by the 5th inning, you've given up 4 runs, that's not competitive enough for me. And it's really not competitive for any rotation in baseball. And if he goes somewhere else and he starts throwing the third pitch because now he's playing on a team that can contend, then okay. But as long as you get a good return, I'm not going to complain about it. I mean, here's the thing. Aroldis Chapman, who, yes, was on a minor league deal, he's been incredible for Texas. Does anybody care about it, though, here? No, because Cole Reagans is playing well. If you trade Brady Singer and you get a decent return and those guys play well, are you even concerned about it? Does it really matter to you? I mean, some of you it will, because another first-round pick that you really couldn't fix. But this should be the new era of pitching development. If Cole Reagans can be your guy over Brady Singer, is anybody going to complain about it? No, and especially not when you get a pretty big return. It's why the Royals have to enter this offseason really trying to capitalize on his value. Because if Brady Singer goes out next year and tanks his value again, game over. And what's even worse then is you could trade him and not get a lot in return, and then he takes off. Let's say he finishes the well pretty well here. His ERA, finishes somewhere 4.7. That's not great by any stretch, but he pitches really well down the stretch. You flip him, and you can still get decent return because of the years of control left and what he showed in the second half. But in the back of your mind, you're going, yes, he can have those 7, 8, 9 start stretches, but he also can blow up like he did in Chicago. He can blow up like he did in Seattle. And he can look like he did in the first half if he's reluctant to go to that third pitch. I just don't have the feel that some of you guys out there do, where he's got to be in the rotation next year because you have to build that rotation. I agree you have to build that rotation. But sometimes speeding up that process is trading away one of the guys who can give you the most value. I mean, does Brady Singer pitching well for the next 2 years in Kansas City do much for the win-loss record? I guess it depends on who you go out there and sign or trade for. And Brady Singer pitching really well as a number 3 would be valuable to this team. But Brady Singer can't be a number 3 right now. He's supposed to be the ace of Kansas City staff, especially after last year. And to take that step back at his age 27 season, that's problematic to me. If he took off this year, I'd still be entertaining a trade opportunity because you could really get a serious return. But there's also a scenario out there where he just never becomes what we all thought he could. There's a real world scenario, as with any baseball player out there. You can't always buy into small sample sizes. And yes, Cole Reagan's small sample size. But to me, it's more so the stuff. If you've listened to this podcast before, I'm all about stuff. I'll buy into your small sample size if you've got lights out stuff. Brady Singer does not have lights out stuff. He can pitch really well. And when that slider's on and he can trust the changeup, it's good stuff. It's not lights out stuff. And it's not number one or number two stuff, which is why if the Reds come calling again, let's say the Reds lose in the NLDS or the NL wildcard game because of pitching, solely because of pitching, and they go, it's time to revamp. Now, if Jonathan India was offered up, I was kind of out on Jonathan India early because he's been a below average hitter, but he's also a guy with a 330 plus OBP. You know, he defensively not as good as Michael Massey, but he's won Rookie of the Year and he's still incredibly young. You know, if they offer Jonathan India and a pitching prospect or two for Brady Singer, maybe you pull the trigger. I don't know what the price would be because I don't know what it's going to look like in the offseason just yet because I don't know the final numbers for Brady Singer. But it's why you have to be more inclined to take deals like that because to me, when you're building this rotation, it's not just trying to get by with guys that may turn it around. And Friday's start was a big-time example for me that I just can never fully trust what Brady Singer is. And I'm not trying to say that starters can't have bad outings. It happens, okay? But for this second half to really wow me, he had to erase what happened in the first half, which in the end you can't. If Brady Singer pitched like he did in the second half early on in the first part of the season, we're probably talking about a different rotation. But since he could never put it together, that was a big-time problem. And I am one of the people in the boat of, I think the Royals missed their chance if they don't trade Brady Singer in the offseason. You can take Cole Reagans, sign a couple guys in the offseason. Maybe you go with Alec Marsh, depending how he closes out this year, and go from there. But if there's value there, this system still needs help. And you can trade guys like Hernandez and Singer because this rotation has upside, but I'm just not sure that keeping Brady Singer long-term is best for him too, or best for the Royals. Maybe Brady Singer can succeed by pitching for a contender. If you're not going to be seriously contending, maybe he never reaches that potential. And that's something you strongly have to consider. Okay, to wrap up our special show today, yes, we are going to talk about Jordan Lyles. And I've got some truth to tell you about Jordan Lyles and this Royals organization. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. I have some things to get off my chest, and I was going to get them off my chest yesterday when doing a podcast episode. But of course, if you follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15, you'd see that connection problems were an issue. So maybe it was something telling me, and Terry said this on Twitter to me, which I completely agree with. Maybe it was my internet telling me, take a deep breath, take a chill pill. Let's not have a show today. Let's just have a show tomorrow, wait and see how the game goes on Sunday, and then we'll go from there. Because I'll be honest, I remember the layout I had, the breakdown I had for that episode. A lot of it was a big-time rant about Jordan Lyles. And it's because Jordan Lyles is now entering that point of the season where you're just in awe. You're numb to his starts for how bad they are, how terrible he looks on the mound. But in the back of your mind, the back of my mind at least, I know that he's still on a 2-year deal. And I've seen the Royals commit to a contract, and a bad one at that, for way too long. And I mean way, 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 way too long. Even if it didn't fit their window, their rebuild, they damn well wanted to hang on to that contract just because they didn't want to pay somebody that wasn't playing for them. Hunter Dozier is the poster child for that. You've heard me say that many a times. Hunter Dozier was the poster child of bad contracts in Kansas City. Just an awful one. And the Royals, every single offseason, would try to feed you that, well, he's looking a little bit different. He's been working in the offseason. He's got a new hand placement at the plate. No, his swing isn't as long. It's very compact. It's 2018 Hunter Dozier. Or 2019 Hunter Dozier, whatever year that was. I think it was 2019. And then he got the contract, and we know what happened with Hunter Dozier. Jordan Lyles, to me, is a much different thing than Hunter Dozier and more unforgivable than the Hunter Dozier debacle. No, Hunter Dozier stayed in Kansas City for as long as he did, A, because he was a first-round pick the Royals made, and they weren't willing to give up on him. B, he succeeded in Kansas City for at least 1 year. He had a good year in 2019. C, he played a spot on the field that the Royals were just not deep in. I mean, going into this year, there was no third baseman really on the roster aside from Hunter Dozier. Until Maikel Garcia was transformed into one of the best defensive third basemen in baseball, they had nobody else to go to. It was Matt Duffy or Nicky Lopez. Both were not third basemen. Jordan Lyles is a very, very cut and dry case here. He's in his first year in Kansas City. He's going to finish as one of the worst starting pitchers in franchise history. He did not do, and don't feed me this, he did not do what they signed him to do. They wanted his numbers to be identical to what he did in Baltimore last year, which was a sub-5 ERA, 180 innings, and yes, he could be that quote-unquote innings eater. Now, limit the walks. I mean, he doesn't deal with a lot of base runners, but it's because he watches those guys run around him all the time. He sees the ball fly into the yard, way into the fountains, way into the seats, and outings are usually done by the third inning. The Royals are 3-21 when Jordan Lyles has made a start for them this year. If you are going to convince the fan base, the public, you are serious about building a competitor, he cannot be on the rotation, he cannot be on the roster in 2024. There's no way, shape, or form that can happen. I won't support it one bit. And anything you do in the offseason would be a wash to me. Anything. I understand that you gave him that contract. It's bad enough you did. But you know you can right that wrong? Admit your mistake and move on. You admitted your mistake with Hunter Dozier, and yes, you're paying him to not be on the roster, but look what it's done for third base. Now Maikel Garcia plays there. If Jordan Lyles comes in as the 5-man or long relief, I promise you, he's not going to succeed in that role. This has been an unbelievably shocking, vile, terrible year for Jordan Lyles. It's been remarkable. He's made it this long into the season. And it's remarkable that he has the most expensive contract of any offseason signing for the Royals this year. That's jarring. It's jarring that somebody gave him that money. It's jarring that somebody said, not 1, but 2 years. And this Seattle start happened a week or 2 ago to the Seattle Mariners. 3 or 4 home runs in 1 inning, just teed off on. And I don't need to see Jordan Lyles throw 8 innings and give up 4 or 5 runs. The reality is he gave up 4 or 5. It's not good enough to win you a game. He's not an innings eater. He's an objectively bad pitcher. He is just not a fit for this team. He's not a fit for a team now. He's not a fit for 2024. I get it that at 41-90, 50 games below 500, you just need guys that are living, breathing human beings to start games. I mean, you have Cole Reagans and Brady Singer and Alec Marsh, and then 2 openers. Zach Greinke's back. I'm assuming he's going to start tomorrow unless they go with an opener again. But what's that message you're sending to your minor league guys? Hey, as long as you got that money in your pocket, as long as you are the veteran, the experienced guy, your job is secure. That's not the way I expected J.J. Picoult in this front office to handle a situation like this. You moved on from Hunter Dozier. At some point in time, you got to say, this was a mistake. This was a brutal mistake. I've seen Kyle Davies, Rudelvis Hernandez. I've seen Sidney Ponson, Jose Lima, Daryl May. Jordan Lyles is worse than all of them. When I watch him throw, I don't see anything of an upside. I know he's had good starts. I mean, I think every blind squirrel can still find a nut. It's a long season. Guys can have good outings. But the overwhelming majority of his outings have been poor. 3-21 when he takes the bump. If you look at that and say, well, he'll bounce back next year, I can't buy into what you're doing. I can't buy that you were trying to build a competitive baseball team because he doesn't fit any sort of future contending Royals team. There's no trade value with Jordan Lyles. And it's about time the Royals start realizing that. That is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. And find us on those podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And you can always catch us on YouTube. Until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.